Morning.
Yeah, pull that up where we can hear you when you speak. Would you introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
I'm Taya Kyle,
And where do you live now?
Midlothian, Texas.
Okay. How long have you lived there?
I think 3 or 4 years.
Okay. And how long have you lived in Texas though?
Since beginning of 2010, so yeah,
About the same.
5 years.
Okay. Now, where are you from originally?
Oregon.
Who were you married to prior to February the 2nd, 2013?
Chris Kyle.
What was Chris doing in San Diego when y'all met?
When we met, he had just graduated BUDS, which is the training for Navy SEALs.
And I forget, do you know, what does BUD stand for?
Basic Underwater Demolition School.
Okay. And so had he been in the Navy sometime before he went to BUD school?
Yeah, he went into the Navy in 1999, and then he completed BUDS when I met him, which was 2001.
Okay. And so when did he get out of the Navy?
End of 2009.
Okay. Did he ever serve overseas?
Yes.
Where did he serve?
In 2000, hold on a second, 2003, 2004, he was in Basar, I think it's called. I'm not as good with the Middle Eastern names. But that's where the war kicked off, and they were taking down ships at sea first and then the oil fields. And then he came back in 2003. He went into 2004. He came back in 2003. 2004, he went to Fallujah, which was where, I don't know if you remember the contractors that were hanging from the bridge. And
this is all in Iraq that we're talking about.
I'm sorry, Iraq. Sorry, yeah.
And then after Fallujah, do you know where he was stationed?
Yep. Then he was in Ramadi in 2006, where his two friends were killed next to, or one was killed and one was severely wounded through his eye next to him.
Where was he after Ramadi?
After Ramadi, he was in 2008. He was in Baghdad and Sadr City, which was the last major stronghold for the change in regime. The Mujahideen was taking over.
Ms. Kyle, and so what was his job? What capacity did he serve at these different places in Iraq?
He was part of a Navy SEAL team, so sometimes he would go out with his team, and he had different jobs that they would do as part of the team. And then he was also sniper Overwatch, and sometimes he'd be detached with different groups, if it was Marines or even different countries, our allies, that they would go out with.
And so if anybody's not familiar with what he did as a sniper, basically, what is his job to do when he's acting as a sniper?
Yeah, so just as a sniper, his job is to do Overwatch, and if any of our allies, Iraqi civilians or soldiers, are in danger, immediate threat, then he takes out the threat by shooting whoever's about to shoot or whoever has a grenade or whatever.
Does this have, when you say Overwatch, does this have him like up on a roof somewhere a lot of the time?
It can be on a roof.
Or maybe somewhere high up in a window or that kind of thing.
Right, all those.
Watching out for other comrades in arms.
Right.
And I forgot to ask you a little bit about Chris. Where did he grow up?
He grew up starting around 2nd or 3rd grade in Midlothian, Texas.
Okay. And did he always live in Texas though his entire life?
Pretty much.
Or he went overseas?
When he was a cowboy, he was in Colorado for a little while, and then in San Diego for the military. And there was a station before he came to San Diego for a little bit. I think it was Tennessee.
And where did he go? Did he go to college?
Yeah, he went to Tarleton.
I mean, was he so good at his job that he actually became recognized for his skill as a sniper?
He did, and
that lead to the book that he wrote?
It did.
Okay. Tell us what's the name of the book if somebody hadn't heard about it.
Right.
What's that called?
The book is American Sniper, and just to be clear, he did not want to write a book. He actively did not want to write it and put it off for years, but because of the record, because of the success, people were going to write it about him, and he wanted to make sure that he could give other people the credit for the service that they did. And the only way to do that was to write it himself.
Once he got out of the military, what kind of job did he start doing?
So before he got out of the military, he had a goal of starting a training company for police and different law enforcement agencies. And some military, not because he thought he was the best, but because he figured if they all shared the different tools that they have and helped each other put different tools in the toolbox, everybody was better off in protecting whatever they were assigned to protect. So he started Craft International outside of Dallas, Texas.
Okay. And so just to make clear, what exactly did Craft International do?
Well, they did a number of things. They were trying to figure out the best way to stay alive as a new business, and so they did do some training for individuals.
What kind of training?
Okay, they did some training, pistol and rifle. So, for example, if people wanted to learn how to shoot, farther than 100 or 300 yards, they could get them doing that pretty quickly. He did some hand-to-hand combat stuff. Not him, but they had somebody else on the team that did that. And
trained people in hand-to-hand combat?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
What else did they do?
Mostly they did that. Then they, towards the end of Chris's life, they were starting to get some contracts doing school securities and talking to school districts about how to secure their district.
Did they also do law enforcement training?
They did some law enforcement training as well, yes.
What were they training law enforcement in?
Same thing, just trying to put more tools in their toolbox. So it could be different sniper tactics or for the SWAT teams, or just different pistol tactics.
Or just shooting training?
Absolutely,
okay.
Yep.
Okay. And did some of their, I don't know what to call them, activities with Craft International, the shooting activities for people that were civilians, not law enforcement, did they involve them going out to different places, different shooting ranges, and doing shooting events?
Yeah, typically what they found was that Rough Creek Lodge had been really open and excited about the idea of having them out there because it would gain them some of the higher end clientele. And then they built a range out there for Craft to use. And they had plans to do some other things as well, but it was a win-win because Rough Creek could introduce their lodge to more people that way that they may not have gotten otherwise. And then Craft had a nice place for people to stay and could get the higher income people there to do it. And then also, teach and make money for the company.
You mentioned Rough Creek Lodge. Where is Rough Creek Lodge?
In Glen Rose, Texas.
Did you and Chris have children?
Oh, sorry. Yes, we had 2 children, a boy and a girl.
And how old are they now?
They're in elementary school, both of them.
How old were they when Chris died?
They were 8 and 6. It's Chris with his parents, Wayne and Debbie Kyle. Sorry, that's Chris and me and our son, and I just found out I was pregnant with my daughter.
Some people might notice he's got this shirt on. I don't know if the jury can read it from the photographs where they are. What is there's a symbol on the shirt, but it also says something on the shirt. What does the shirt say?
On the left hand, or it's his right, but as we're looking at on the left-hand side, it says Fitco Cares. And
While we're on the subject, can you tell us what is Fitco Cares?
So Fitco Cares, Chris always had this idea when he got out of the military that he wanted to help other people recover, and working out was his best outlet for stress, the healthiest thing, helped him get his mind, feeling better. And so he had the good fortune, it sort of felt like divine intervention at the time, to meet Jason Kose, who was the owner of Fitco. And Jason had just had an experience a couple weeks before where he felt like God was pushing him to do something more. And so when he heard Chris's idea, being an owner of a fitness company, he could get the equipment to veterans and their families. So they started the foundation that Chris would, his goal was to have them take it and run it, and they did.
Okay. Basically, just easiest terms we can, what does Fitco Cares do?
Okay, gets gym equipment to veterans so that they can work out and have a healthy outlet.
And why was that, why were they giving gym equipment to veterans? Why not just give them a gym membership?
Oh, thank you. Chris and I both found like we just preferred to be at home working out if we could. And a lot of the guys who come back severely wounded are either burned or have deformities, prosthetics, and things that when they're in, let's say, Walter Reed, and they're around a lot of other guys who have those same type of injuries, they feel totally normal. But sometimes when they go home and they're in an environment where they're the only one, they feel like they're getting stared at or looked at. And so it's just another reason why not to go to the gym. So the idea is get it in their homes where they can do it on their own time.
And also, with Fit Go Cares, give gym equipment, not just to the veterans, but so their families could use it as well.
Yeah, they did do it for some of the families, and in fact, even some. I think they tried to start giving it to a couple of widows and Gold Star mothers.
And
Gold Star being somebody who's lost their son.
so he's got on the Fit Go Cares shirt. I guess this is what we're talking about here. And then there's a symbol here. I think we're actually going to see it in the second photograph. But just back before we get off on another picture, he said Easter morning, and this would have been after 2010, like about what year?
This was it was April 2012.
In this photograph, I guess he's in the military here.
Actually, no, that was after he got out and was running Craft International. They were doing a photo shoot with a company that sells tactical gear.
Okay. So this is a post picture.
Yes.
Okay. But we also see in this one the symbol on his shirt and on the sleeve of this guy that's with him here.
Correct.
Which is the same one, I guess, that we saw in
Correct.
this photograph here. Explain to us, what is that symbol?
So when they're at war, I don't know, maybe you've heard the term before, the psychological ops. And so it's been done for many, many wars in our history. And what it does is tries to get into the hearts and minds of the enemy using any means you can to get them not to come out and fight more. So one of the goals was to take the Punisher skull that was from Marvel Comics and spray it on their gear or their tanks, and hopefully that would be an incentive for people to not come out and fight just based on that psychological operation type thing. And if it did get ugly and they left their mark, that they would know when they saw him coming the next time.
So it was a character from Marvel Comics.
Correct.
They adopted this SEAL team.
Yes.
And did that sort of become the logo for Craft International?
Yeah, what Chris wanted to do is to have a logo that was intensely personal, and he wanted to honor the lives of Ryan Job and Mark Lee. Mark Lee was the one who was killed with him, and Ryan Job was his friend who survived the the gunshot through his eye, but ended up dying later in surgery. So he wanted to put something over the right eye because that's where Ryan was shot, and so they ended up putting a it's sort of a mix between crosshairs and a cross, a Christian cross, and then the quote that was around it, not in this one, but the other picture on the helicopter, is a line that Ryan Job said to the media after the Somali pirate shooting.
So the Punisher symbol, I don't know if we can see it so well in this picture, but it has a cross over the eye.
Correct.
That's because of Ryan Job.
Correct.
So that though became the symbol for Craft International. And so you're nodding, you have to say out loud.
Oh, I'm sorry. It did, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
We were talking about Rough Creek Lodge,
Correct.
and this is a photo out here at Rough Creek Lodge.
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
This is kind of as you drive up the driveway to the main lodge.
Correct.
Okay. Now I think we got a little off track. We were talking about Rough Creek. You were mentioning to me about some kids' activities that they have out there. So you took your kids out there.
Correct.
And what kind of activities would they have for kids out there?
We did a fossil dig that wasn't far from that stone there.
They have shooting sports for adults out there.
They do.
And did Chris actually help the folks at Rough Creek set up the long range out there?
He did.
And kind of explain how that came about.
Okay. So they had, at Rough Creek, they already had some paintball with the hay bales, and but they wanted to, like I said, increase their business by getting in a different clientele, and they wanted to use Chris's name, and training was a good way for them to increase business, they thought. So they did make a range out on a backfield that they built specifically to his dimensions, guidelines, safety requirements, and it was a good place to get sort of long range shooting, and it's away from everything else so that it's not, disturbing other people doing other activities.
And because he helped set that range up and facilitated that for the Rough Creek folks, could he pretty much go out there whenever he wanted to?
I suppose yes, he could.
I mean, unless somebody else was using the range.
Correct, but it probably at that point would have only been their company. Um, it's just something, I guess it would be a special occasion to do that because it's a drive.
Did Chris have some trouble himself adjusting to civilian life after he came back from the military?
Uh, yes, I guess is the short answer, but it.
What
I
kind
think. Go ahead.
What kind of problems specifically did he have?
Yeah, I think the bottom line is that you miss the brotherhood and you miss going to work in an environment where somebody give their life for you. He was working a lot, but he also was drinking some, not morning till evening or anything like that. But some guys might come home and have a drink after work or something. Maybe he'd have 3 or 4. Um, Not obnoxious or anything. He had. Um, Sometimes night sweats a lot. There were times when he first got out that, we'd have to change the sheets because the sweat would be soaking through the sheets. He was irritable, he did gain some weight before he got back into working out. Still looked great though. But
You have trouble sleeping ever?
oh yeah, and definitely insomnia type things where he couldn't fall asleep.
And now, did he actually get a certain percentage disability from the VA for post-traumatic stress disorder,
He did. He got 30%.
PTSD?
Correct.
Did he also get some disability for physical problems?
Oh yes, he did.
Did he have some injuries that he suffered while he was in the military?
Absolutely. He had both knees operated on, his back, his fingers that were broken, high blood pressure, his eyes and ears were definitely hit pretty hard.
You were talking about how he got back into working out, and kind of on that topic, did he come to know a guy in y'all's neighborhood or through your children named Chad Littlefield?
Yes.
Okay. Is this a picture of Chris and Chad?
Yes, it is.
So this is Chad here on the side.
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
And then outside of his activities at Craft, and you mentioned FitGo Cares, were there other activities that Chris started to do with veterans?
Yes, ma'am. They had, there was a charity, I believe it was Base Camp 40, that does hunts for veterans. And Chris knew that his friend, Ryan Job, who was shot through the eye, they took him on a hunt actually, and he was able to get a record-setting bull elk, even though he was completely blind. But they used a computer-operated scope and somebody with voice stuff, and it made Ryan feel amazing. And competing in triathlons, that kind of stuff too. He did that, but something outdoors. So when Chris was invited to go on these hunts with guys, veterans, and he would do that, and then they sometimes at a friend's ranch. They would have different wounded guys out there that would just be having a place to shoot long distances was a big deal because you can go to your city range anytime, but to get out in nature, number one, feels amazing, and number two, to have a long range thing and then just chill with another guy seemed to be very healing. And I think the last thing was his friend Marcus Luttrell said that the healing that he could get 1 week in the outdoors was exponentially greater than he could have ever gotten in a hospital. 2 or 3 months at a hospital, and he wouldn't have felt better than just 1 week outdoors. So that was kind of the philosophy.
So the philosophy was getting veterans. Were they guys with both physical and psychological problems?
Yeah, I mean, to the level of, Chris has a lot of friends who are in different, if it's FBI or police or military, all different branches. And a lot of them have technically, they don't admit it to a lot of people, but they certainly have shared it with us, PTSD. And that's fine. I mean, you can't be a human being and not have it if you're in an extreme situation, probably, which those guys were all in extreme situations. And they hung out, they had their families, they went hunting. I mean, they're still working in their jobs in the police department. And
so he would take these guys with, whatever psychological problem or what, maybe they had a physical problem, and that wasn't uncommon for him to take them out in nature and do some kind of shooting at sport.
No, that's the whole point, is to take people who are having a hard time for physical or mental reasons.
So was Chris kind of known, I guess, in y'all's area, and people knew that he did these kind of things for veterans.
Yes.
And so let's get to how did Chris come to meet Eddie Ralph?
So one morning when he took our kids to school and dropped them off, the mother said, his mother said,
We can't talk about what somebody else said, but
oh, okay, yeah. So the mother, gave
no, without going into what their conversation
asked
was.
him to meet with her son.
Is your understanding, did Eddie Ralph's mother work at your kid's school?
Yes.
And did she approach Chris about helping her son?
Yes, thank you. Yes.
And do you know that by some notes that were actually sent home with Chris containing some phone numbers?
Yeah, in addition to what he told me, yes.
And is Jody Ralph, who you've come to know as Eddie Ralph's mother,
Yes, ma'am.
the one that worked at the school?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, had Chris ever met Eddie Ralph prior to February the 2nd, 2013?
No,
Um,
not that I know of.
Now, to your knowledge, did they have some conversations by phone prior to February 2nd, 2013?
Yes.
I guess to figure out what they were going to do that day.
Yeah, the first one was just to introduce himself and just touch base and sort of follow up with what he told the mom he was going to do. And then the second one was, I think, to make the specific plans.
Okay. And then had you yourself ever met Eddie Ralph
No,
prior to that date?
no.
Okay. In fact, you never met him in your life until court appearances.
Right.
Now, we were talking a little earlier about that Punisher symbol, and I've shown and introduced State's Exhibit number 129. So this is Chris's truck. What type of truck is that?
It's a Ford F-350.
It's a big truck.
It's a big truck. Yes, ma'am.
Hard for somebody as short as me to get up into.
My kids could do it, but yeah, you could. But yeah, it's a little challenging.
Challenging wearing a skirt.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So on the back here, do we see that Punisher symbol that we were talking about?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And do you know that this is Chris's truck from the license plate number?
Yes.
You've checked the registration and your paperwork, and you know that's the right license plate.
Correct.
Okay. And plus, it has the Punisher symbol on it.
Right. And the come and take it license plate.
Okay. Let me talk to you, Ms. Kyle, about February the 2nd, 2013. What were his plans that day?
Yeah, his plans were to go to the games in the morning and then just take a quick trip down to meet this veteran that the mother had talked about. And he specifically chose a place that was beautiful and peaceful and that gave some time to talk so that they could talk for an hour and a half on the way down, or like it happens with a lot of people, shoot first, then if they're bonded on the way home, talk, like I was saying about the bonfires. Sometimes after you do the shooting is when the real talk happens. But he specifically chose a place down there. So he anticipated maybe hour and a half there, hour and a half back, hour shooting was about how it was supposed to go down.
So you knew he was going to go to Rough Creek that day.
Yes.
And did you know he was going to go out there and shoot?
Yes.
Did you actually see him put guns in the car?
Yes.
And did you know that it was this veteran whose mother worked at the kids' school that he had been talking to?
Yes, ma'am.
Now, at that time, did you know his name?
I did.
Okay. Did you know his name was Eddie Ralph?
I did.
Okay. So you knew he was going to Rough Creek with Eddie Ralph.
Yes, ma'am.
And now, did you know whether Chad Littlefield was going to go with them out to Rough Creek?
I did. Yeah, Chad was at the house when they left.
Okay. So tell us about what time did Chris and Chad leave y'all's house to go on this trip?
Well, I took the girls home real quick, and then they were getting ready, and I think that was around noon. And they were, Chris was stressing, running, trying to get all of the stuff in the truck that most guys like to shoot. He always liked to bring kind of different stuff for them to make it a little more interesting and, I don't know, make it special.
When did you last see Chris that day?
We were at the house, and we were both trying to hurry and get to where we were supposed to go. And so he had gone around the house one way to try to find me, and I, like comedy, eventually we found each other in the hallway. And, he just said, he was inviting, or he asked Chad to come along.
You said Chad had come to the house.
Chad was at the house. Wanted to have Chad have an extra set, just to have an extra set of eyes. And then and then I said, hey, maybe make sure that this guy knows that Chad can be trusted 100% so that he's comfortable saying whatever he wants to say. He said, oh, yeah, no, I definitely will. And then just said we loved each other and gave each other a kiss and a hug like we always did. And then I just, I left. And when I left, he was in the driveway still kind of trying to get more stuff in there and get going.
Now, did you talk by phone with Chris sometime that afternoon?
Yes.
About what time was that?
I think it was probably, maybe 2 or 3, maybe. Yeah.
Mid-afternoon.
Right.
But where was he when you called him?
I believe he was at Rough Creek. I mean, no, he was. He said he was. Yeah.
And what was his demeanor like when you talked to him on the phone?
So it just he was like, hello, just a little bit more quick. Usually it's like, hey babe, and I just had a quick question for him if he wanted to go out with our friends for dinner that night. And so I just said, hey, I know you're working, you're doing your stuff, but do you want to go out with our friends for dinner tonight? And he goes, yeah, that'd be fine. And I said, okay. I said, are you okay? And he's like, yep. And that's not common for him. Usually our conversations were a lot more, and I could tell something was up, and then he was just quiet. And, a lot of times when that was the case with him, it'd be like, I'm at a point where I don't know if I should say more because obviously there's something more, or if I should just he's probably dealing with it and go.
How would you characterize what you were hearing on the phone? Just like what emotion?
I mean, I would say irritated. I thought he was irritated. I thought the guy must be, I thought he.
Well, I don't want you to think about, speculate on.
No, not. I'm just saying, okay. So what would cause him to be irritated is what I was thinking.
Right, and so yeah.
Yeah.
So he just didn't seem like normal Chris when you talk.
No, because normally going out there, especially a place like Rough Creek, it's beautiful. He feels really good about helping somebody. Usually, he's making their day, and he knows it. Which is what had happened earlier. He thought that guy sounded really excited to go, and so he thought he was doing a good thing.
So he sounded a little irritated when you talked to him mid-afternoon.
It was very short, and it wasn't short like, hey, you're interrupting a good time. It was short like, I wish I could say more, but I'm not going to because there are people around.
So now, were y'all supposed to meet up at a certain time for your
Yes.
friends?
Yeah, I think it was, maybe 5 or 6 or something. I mean.
So he was supposed to be back before then?
Correct.
When did you first, figure out or learn that something was wrong?
I was getting the kids into the, the family car to go out to dinner because since I hadn't heard from him, well, first of all, Leanne, Chad's wife, had called me and said, hey, have you heard from the guys? I haven't heard from them. And so I called once and didn't get an answer. And then
Chris once?
I did. I believe so, yeah. I mean, I didn't get an answer, but at least I think I did. But then I texted, are you okay? I'm getting worried.
Did he text back?
No, which is, there's one thing about Chris is that he never wanted me to worry about anything, and I never wanted him to. So I also knew that if I said, hey, I'm worried, that even if there was something serious going on or they were in a deep conversation, that he would take the time to just be like, all good, babe, call you later, whatever, just something quick to let me know. So that's about when I started to get concerned. And then when I was putting getting the kids in the car, and the other neighbors were outside at their houses, getting in their cars, because we were going with literally 4 houses in a square. We were all going to go out for the one neighbor's birthday. And a guy Chris went to school with, who's a police officer, pulled up to the house.
Was he on duty?
He was on duty.
So he wasn't just there as a friend?
Correct. And even on duty, sometimes he would stop by our house just to say hi or check in.
So when he first pulls up, do you immediately think something's wrong, or are you thinking maybe he's pulling up as a friend?
it's kind of hard not to put some of it together that I haven't heard from him and I'm worried and I haven't heard from him and then a police officer shows up. But
And do you remember that officer's name?
Mark Tribley.
And
Mark Tribley. I think it's Triebly.
And
Yeah, close to that anyway.
And so at that point in time,
I think, yeah, so a lot of times in the military, there's always rumors that somebody's gotten hurt or something's gone down, but I knew from experience, you don't ever, ever, ever go to that place where you believe it until it's confirmed, because you can borrow a whole lot of trouble that way. So I did see him and I did say, hey, Mark, what's up? Just like, I'm going to believe the best. And he said, have you seen Chris's truck? And I said, no, Mark, I haven't. I said, what's going on? And he said, he goes, well, I think Chris has been hurt. And I said, okay.
Did the police officers that you said he asked you if you'd seen Chris's truck?
Correct.
And did he ask for some additional information about Chris's truck?
Yes, he asked for the license plate number.
Okay.
And I think the VIN or something.
And then did people start calling you on the phone?
Yes, so I was in the kitchen waiting for more information from Mark Tribley, the officer that was there. And my phone, I was starting to get texts from a number of people, Chris's teammates, different people, and I knew something was up. But
basically, people are hearing things on
right.
social media.
Somewhere. I didn't know where, but somewhere, yeah.
And so did somebody's mother call you?
Yes.
A guy that Chris served with?
Mark Lee, the guy I was telling you was killed in Ramadi when Chris was with him. Okay. His mother was calling.
Okay. We can't really go into what she said.
Okay.
But she called you.
Yes.
And had she been hearing rumors about what had happened?
As far as I knew, yeah, it was a rumor. She's the first one I actually answered because I didn't want to hear from anybody except the police.
Did you have to actually confront the police and make them tell you more information?
That part I probably did. Maybe I did. I didn't.
It's kind of a blur around that time.
Well, the only thing that's a blur is I know I ended up from my kitchen in my hallway talking to Mark Tribley with my friend next to me. I just don't remember if I said enough, I'm going over there, or if he said, tell Taya to come down here. I don't remember which way it happened.
Well, were you eventually, though, told by somebody that Chris was dead?
Yes.
And who told you that?
Mark Tribley. Police
officer?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So was it still that evening of February the 2nd when you got that bad news?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to visit with you with just a couple other subjects. One is gun safety. Did Chris know about gun safety?
Actually, he was adamant about gun safety to the point of the kids' Nerf guns or even a rubber gun that they trained with. It always had to go straight up, straight down, never across the body.
Okay. Did you ever shoot with him?
Yes.
And what was his attitude about gun safety?
I mean, I feel like he would say, there's just no, gun safety is such a big deal. I mean, you get in a lot of trouble in the SEAL teams, if you made any mistakes whatsoever. And the more experienced you are, almost the more safety conscious you tend to be.
So was he pretty strict enforcer of rules about gun safety?
100%. I mean, I remember I had a rubber training gun one time that I just, I was like, oh, that's, and I was going to push it this way, and he was like, no, babe. I said, well, it's rubber. It doesn't even have any. And he said, it's just a habit. You just, don't ever take it across the body like this. So just.
And now, did he ever take your son or your daughter hunting?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. And did he teach the kids about gun safety?
Yes. Like I said, even their Nerf guns, they're not allowed to, carry, like they wouldn't carry a, loaded weapon except if they're in the middle of a play.
So would Chris have ever pointed a weapon into anyone, even if it was unloaded? Would he have pointed a weapon at somebody in jest?
Absolutely not. The whole point of that is to be in such a habit of doing it that you don't ever just casually do it. It's just always your habit. So your habit is so safety conscious that you don't making a mistake. You just don't know any way to, you don't do anything different.
And was he that way when he was out at some sort of shooting event or a shooting range? Was he an enforcer of gun safety?
Well, yes, absolutely. In fact, I remember distinctly somebody asking him to be out at their ranch, and some of the guys had been drinking, and he they wanted him to go out and keep an eye on everybody. And first time he did it, and he came back and he said, "Never again. They're not, it's not. You can't keep an eye on everybody like that."
Okay. So that's Chris's iPhone.
Yes, ma'am.
Recognize the case.
Yes.
Kind of a khaki.
Yes.
States Exhibit 117.
It's Chris's wallet with a credit card or Visa in it.
You recognize this looks kind of like an American flag card here.
Yep, it's the and the 4120. It's upside down, but that was the first 4 digits.
And what is that card?
It's a USAA Visa.
Okay. Now, did Chris dip Copenhagen?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we don't know necessarily if this is his can of Copenhagen because one looks like another one, but he
Correct.
did dip Copenhagen.
Silver top, yes, ma'am.
And then 119. Whose knife is this?
That's a knife that Zach Brown gave him the Southern grind.
Eric Gray gave to Chris.
Yes, ma'am. Sorry, Chris. Yes, yes.
And number 20. Oh, I'm sorry, 120. Whose keys are these?
Those are Chris's house key, probably a gun closet key in the Ford truck, and then his Benchmade knife.
There's a knife as well.
Yes, ma'am.
And so all these items we know belong to Chris, except for the Copenhagen. Could have been somebody else's, but it's the kind that he dips.
Yes, ma'am.
I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Mr. St. John.
Thank you, Judge. I'll pass it to Your Honor.
Ms. Kyle, did Chris or his friends, people that he regularly associated with, did they do illegal drugs?
Absolutely not.
And so would Chris, to your knowledge, have been familiar with what someone looked like who was under the influence of illegal drugs?
I highly doubt it. I mean, the Brotherhood and the teams, he'd get kicked out for that, and that's who he spent the majority of his life with. And then when he got out, and he's working with professionals in the business world, and I don't think they were doing that either, and none of our close friends do, that I know of anyway.
Thank you. I'll pass the witness.
And just to brief follow-up, I don't really want to ask this question, but everybody has tough times, and your husband did. I respect what he did for a living. You said when he came back, I don't care what label you put on something, his behavior was changed a little bit based on what he saw and things like that. And I believe you said he would consume alcohol to an extensive amount. Is that right?
Well, I don't think it's an extensive amount. I just mean, some guys come home from work, have 1 or 2, maybe he'd have 3 or 4. So for him, that was more than typical, but.
But based on his personal experience and based on what you observed, he would know what someone looks like who had too much to drink.
Actually, no, I wouldn't say that to be true because a lot of the guys that he worked with were pretty darn good at holding their alcohol, and so was he. So, no.
Are you aware, and you don't have to say what it was, do you have knowledge of the text that your husband sent to Chad Littlefield as a girl in that plane pickup truck?
I do.
That's all I have. Pass the witness.
I have no further questions for Ms. Kyle.
All right, you may step down and return to your seat.
Would you introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
I am Judy Littlefield.
Okay.
Chad was my son.
What did Chad do for a living?
He was the logistics manager at Eagle Labs, which is a water treatment company. They do small towns, Cedar Creek, and that don't have a big purifying plant in that facility.
Is this Chad?
Yes, it is.
To make this clear, had Chad ever been in the military, Ms. Littlefield?
No,
So what kind of things would he go and do with Chris Kyle that involved this? You said it's counting ammunition here. What kind of things would they do together?
he would go out to the range. He would go and help Chad, Chris, when they were doing fundraisers or things like that. he would help install equipment, things like that. The fitness equipment and stuff like that. That's Chad and my little granddaughter Morgan.
And in this picture, we see him with the beard. And that's a little dark here. So had Chad ever gone with Chris to do activities with the veterans before February 2013?
Chad was not military, but he had a passion for veterans. And on one occasion they had gone to Aransas Pass, and Chris found out there was a vet in San Antonio, double amputee, and they left there. Aransas Pass sent the girls on to Fiesta, Texas or something. And Chris and Chad went and got the book and spent the afternoon with this person in San Antonio.
Now, did Chad also know how to shoot a gun?
Yes.
Is that something that he grew up with, hunting or using guns?
He hunted, but he had his CHL license and, had to learn how to shoot with it.
And you say CHL, you're talking about a concealed handgun license.
Yeah.
Okay. And had he had that a long time, or did he just get that recently?
He had it, I guess, a couple of years.
Did you know what Chad's plans were on February the 2nd, 2013?
Yes, I did.
You had mentioned that you spoke with him on a regular basis.
Yes.
Okay. So did you know where he was going that day?
Yes, I did.
And did you know who he was going with?
Yes.
And who was he going with?
With Chris.
And did you know that they would be going with a veteran?
Yes.
Did you know the guy's name at that time?
No, I did not.
And did you know that he was going out to Rough Creek Lodge?
Yes.
Okay, so you knew that. I'm going to talk to you about February the 2nd, the next day. You said, did you talk to Chad that day on February the 2nd?
We text.
Okay. So you texted with him,
Yes.
but didn't see him that day.
No.
What time was it, or when was it that you first became aware that something was wrong?
Not until about 9:30 that night on Saturday night.
And how were you made aware that something was wrong?
Taya called and said there had been an accident and we needed to come to her house.
Okay. And then now at some point during that evening, did y'all learn that Chris was dead?
Yes. Yes, when I arrived there, Leanne met me and she said, Chris is gone. We don't know about Chad yet.
And so did y'all eventually receive word that Chad had been killed too?
A law enforcement officer came out and finally confirmed Chad's his wallet and stuff was in Chris's truck. And so they were having a problem identifying, I guess. But it was way into the night when we finally learned.
Thank you so much, Ms. Littlefield. I'll pass the witness.
Did he go deer hunting? Did he use rifles at all, or?
Yes, he did. His hobbies were deer hunting and fishing.
And I don't want you to say what it is, but do you have knowledge of a text between Mr. Kyle and your son while they drove to Rough Creek Lodge in Mr. Kyle's black Ford pickup truck? Are you aware of what the text contained?
Yes, sir.
Well, bless you, no further questions.
Ms. Littlefield, I just have a couple other questions. You had said Chad was a conservative person. Did he use illegal drugs?
No, not at all.
And did the people that he hung out with do illegal drugs?
No.
So do you know if Chad would have had any experience knowing what the signs are of somebody that's intoxicated on some illegal drugs? Like, say, PCP or embalming fluid or marijuana laced with something?
Not to my knowledge. That was something that we didn't deal with. If he had any knowledge of it, it was probably what he had heard.
I'll pass the witness.
No further questions.
All right, you may return to your seat.
Good afternoon, Mr. Alvarez. Just so the jury and for the knows your name and the record has it clear, what is your full name?
Frank Donovan Alvarez.
Okay, and Mr. Alvarez, how are you currently employed?
I'm the resident manager at Rough Creek Lodge.
And through your work with Rough Creek Lodge, did you become acquainted with the gentleman Chris Kyle?
Yes, sir.
Now, we'll show State's Exhibit number 1, which is a photograph of what are we seeing here in this photograph, Exhibit 1?
You're coming. You would have come from 67. You're going down County Road 2013 to the turn into the lodge.
And here in State's Exhibit 2,
You're a little further down County Road 2013, coming towards the lodge.
State's Exhibit 3,
A little further still, you've made the turn into the lodge's main road.
So what we've seen so far, and we'll see in exhibit number 4, we're looking at the main entrance of the lodge.
Correct.
So if you're a member of the public coming out, that's what you would see as you enter the lodge.
That's correct.
And we got happy with the camera. This is a close-up view of the entrance gate and some of the land of the lodge.
Yes, sir.
Everything on the other side of that gate, does that belong to the lodge?
Yes, sir. That's all Rough Creek.
Okay, and we'll just go through a few of these that don't necessarily, is this just scenery from the road going into the lodge?
Right. Yeah, that's the 2.5 mile road that enters into the lodge, and that's part of that road.
Just for the record, Judge, what is that exhibit number?
6. 7. Now, State's Exhibit 8, which has already been admitted, or was previously admitted, what are we looking at depicted in this photograph?
You just came across a low water crossing, and to the right is Mallard Lake, and then kind of directly behind the rock is the lodge itself.
So up here, we're seeing glimpses of the lodge itself.
Yes, sir.
And State's Exhibit 9, what is that we're looking at?
That is the kids' ranch.
What is depicted here?
That is the main lodge. You're kind of looking across the entry road there to the main lodge.
What is this?
That is the entrance to the shooting range.
And then we have a close-up of the sign. See if we can read it. It says shooting complex, it's Exhibit 21.
Correct.
So this is if we're looking down the entrance, we're going into the shooting range. Is the shooting range very far down that road?
200 yards.
Now in Exhibit 22, is this the shooting range?
Yes, that is the shooting range itself.
Now is it just around the corner, backing up to Exhibit 20, is what we looked at in Exhibit 22, is that just around the bend here on this road?
Yes, just you see kind of the van there on your left. You just go around that bend and it's right there.
If you were to stand and looking this way and make a 180 and look the other way, is there any sort of structure behind in that area that has dog kennels?
Yeah, you would see the dog kennels, and you can also see the lodge from there.
Okay, so you can see the lodge and everything from this location.
Yes, sir.
So it's not secluded.
No, sir.
Now, the dog kennels. Let's talk about the dog kennels. Are we talking about just a small container or dog house for a few dogs, or what are we talking about?
No, we typically have around 60 dogs. It's a pretty large structure.
And it's just right there across that county road.
Yes, sir.
What other structures are there around the dog kennels?
There are 2 guide houses, two homes that some of our staff live in,
Okay.
are in that area, and that's really the only other thing right there.
Now, if you were standing in this location, I know you've been working out there 17 years. If you're standing out right in this location, would you be able to hear from time to time dogs barking?
Yes, very easily.
What about if you were looking at State's Exhibit 22 again? What if you were in this parking lot for the shooting sports range?
You hear the dogs?
You still hear the dogs?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay. What are we looking at here?
It's just a safety sign that we put up, for folks to handle their guns safely, giving them the rules that we have.
So, and was this in place there on February the 2nd, 2013?
Yes, sir.
Now, the sports range that we see depicted here, what county is it in?
ERAF.
So once you cross the lodge and go to the shooting range, you remain in Erath County that entire time.
Yes, sir.
What are we looking at here?
You're looking out off of the shooting deck towards the shooting range, towards the targets.
Okay, so if we were standing in front on the other side of this deck here depicted in Exhibit 22, then we would be seeing what is shown in Exhibit 24.
Yes, sir.
We have more targets, is that
Right.
right?
Just a little closer view of them. Yes, sir.
Is this a view off to the right of the shooting range deck?
Yes.
Well, Mr. Alvarez, were you working at Rough Creek Lodge on February the 2nd, 2013?
Yes, I was.
What job duties were you carrying out on that day?
I'm the resident manager, so I'm kind of just in charge of operations. I was doing my normal, just working in the office and taking care of the hotel guests.
And that was a Saturday, is that right?
That's correct.
Did you have contact with Chris Kyle on that day?
Yes.
And how did that come about?
I got a phone call from the front desk that said that Chris was there and he wanted to use the range, and I went out to meet him.
Okay. Did you have any more communication with him after that point?
I didn't.
About what time of day was it? And I'm sure you weren't just staring at your clock, but about what time of day was it?
It was about 3:15.
Okay.
Chris said he was only going to be out there for about 45 minutes.
When did you first get information that something had happened out at the range?
About 5 o'clock, I got a radio call that said I needed to get over to the shooting range, that something had happened.
So some information had come into the dispatcher of the lodge that something was awry.
Yes.
And did you respond to that?
Yes, I did.
How did you respond to it?
Well, I got the keys to one of our vehicles and I headed over there. Some of our staff was already there, but I headed over to the shooting range.
Did you ascertain from when you got there who had been first on the scene?
To my knowledge, I believe it was Justin.
When you got to the shooting sports range, besides the three individuals who from Rough Creek Lodge who were there, what did you discover?
Well, I saw Chris and Chad, down, bleeding. So, and the guys were working on him, trying to see if they could help him.
Who was doing what to try to save these men?
Well, all three of the guys, they were doing chest compressions. David had the defibrillator, and he was working on Chris, trying to shock him. And they just kept rotating, doing the compressions and trying to resuscitate him.
Was a call made out to public safety officials to come help as well?
Yes, that was made actually before they called me. That was made from the Beretta room.
I could ask you to describe what you saw, but we have photographs. Maybe you had a chance to review some photographs that we have prepared.
Yes, I did.
Is this, what are we looking at from this perspective?
You're driving up to the shooting platform from that curve from the photos we saw earlier.
Is that the same structure from a different angle?
Yes, sir, it is.
Now, having gone through these photos, as they progress into the higher numbers, do we get closer to the deck as we move in, such as in Exhibit 32?
Yes, sir. Yeah, you're getting closer to it.
What we see depicted here is a number of firearms, crime scene tape, and the back of the deck.
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's just closer up to the same deck.
Now, looking up, we see a firearm with no magazine in it over to the right. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And a backpack.
Right.
Frank, what are we looking at where I'm pointing?
To the far right?
Here.
Yes,
What is that? Who is that?
that's Chris.
State's Exhibit 34. More of the ammunition and a rifle with no magazine in it. Is that correct?
Yes, that's where it was when I got there.
More of the rifles.
Yes, sir.
Is that Chris?
That's Chris.
Now we see two men in this photograph. The one on the ground below the deck, who is this?
That's Chris Kyle.
The man who is on his back up on the deck, who is that?
That's Chad Littlefield.
And you recognize them when you saw them?
Yes, sir.
So Frank, looking at these photographs, we see their shirts are unbuttoned. Was that done when you arrived?
Yep.
On the scene?
Yes, the guys were starting to do that. They were working on Chris and Chad.
So you had a medic team on site there at Rough Creek to try to work on them?
David was a EMT at one point, and the other two guys were just helping.
So we see over here, we see this apparatus up here on the deck. Is that something that came after you initially arrived?
Yes, that came after I initially arrived. Yes, sir.
Eventually paramedics arrived, is that right?
Yeah, I think about 20 minutes later.
State's Exhibit 43. Is this Chad?
That's Chad.
State's Exhibit 44. State's Exhibit 45. State's Exhibit 46. Now, Frank, this what appears to be blood down below the left foot of Chad, was that there when you arrived?
Yes, it was.
State's Exhibit 47. State's Exhibit 48. Frank, is this a close-up of that same blood?
Yes, that's the same blood spot.
Were those 4 streaks through the blood, possibly a 5th? Were those there when you arrived?
Yeah, that was exactly that way.
State's Exhibit 49. State's Exhibit 50. State's Exhibit 51. This is Chris.
It's Chris. Yes, that's Chris.
Pass the witness.
I'm gonna have you look at that for me.
Yes, sir.
That's one of the state's exhibits that's been admitted into evidence. You testified on direct that you can see the other structures from the range and you can hear dogs barking. That's standing at the entrance off of County Road 199,
Yeah, they're standing at 199 looking towards the shooting structure.
looking towards the shooting structure. And my question was, is it somewhat screened off by cedar trees or some type of brush?
Yes,
Okay. So can you see like parts of the top of it?
I can see one corner of it on the
One
right
corner
side.
of it?
Uh-huh.
I asked you to get to where we're going there. We took a right on 199
Right.
and went a half mile. That was your testimony.
Yes, sir.
Is there any structures right there on 199 on the county road?
No, between the houses in here, no.
Okay. And then once you get to the entrance to the range, you take a left off of 199 and you drive another 200 yards.
Mhm.
And behind those trees are the range.
Yes, sir.
And there's no structures between where you turn off of 199 and travel that 200 yards down the entrance to the range other than the shooting platform, is there?
That's correct.
Okay. Pass the witness. Pass the witness. I don't have any further questions.
All right, you may return outside the court.
What was your job description there when you started out in September of 12?
I was a part-time wildlife guide.
On February the 2nd, 2013, is that a day you remember well?
Yes.
Did you go ahead and approach the shooting range deck?
Yes, I had instructed my guests to go ahead and put ear protection on just in case they were shooting as we pulled up.
And was there any shooting going on?
No, there was not.
Now back, just to,
Yes, sir.
backing up on a little bit different topic. You're familiar with the complex. This states Exhibit 20 being the entrance to the shooting sports range.
Yes.
This is looking toward it. Look, if I were standing where that picture was taken and behind me, is there a set of dog kennels back there?
Yes, there's a set of dog kennels behind the trees behind your back there.
Are they noisy?
Yes.
All right, so y'all go ahead and go through that gate. Was that gate open when you
The
approached
gate
it?
was open, yes.
So you went ahead and went in.
Yes, sir.
Now, as you approached the range, did you see weapons? Sporting firearms out on the deck.
Yes, there was an assortment of rifles and pistols. Looked like they had been laid out.
Did you see any people when you first started to approach?
No.
Did that concern you?
It made me think that they might be done and they were going downrange to put down the other Bravo flag that we have.
Did you see any vehicles there?
No.
Did you notice that, or was that a?
Yes, that's what made me think they were probably heading downrange because there's a big berm to our left and you can't see past it on the road to get to the other Bravo flag that's probably 1,500 yards from the shooting platform.
So with the kind of truck that Chris Kyle had, could he have driven down the range and seen if he hit his target?
Yes.
So at this point, you're not even alarmed.
No, not yet.
Do you drive up toward the deck, or do you get out and start walking at this point?
We stopped the mule probably 50 yards back just to see if they were downrange driving before we approached. And after, 5 minutes, we pulled up right next to the platform. And that's when we saw their bodies there.
What did you see as you got closer to the deck?
First, we saw the body that was laying in the grass. And then we saw the other one on the platform.
What did you do?
I told them to stay in. I got out and walked over. And once I saw what was happening, I told them to call 911 and go back to the lodge.
What did you do?
I stayed, called on the radio for some help out at the long range, then waited for them to show up.
How were the two men you found at the range, how were they positioned?
One in the grass. Chris was face down, his nose in the dirt. And Chad was on the platform on his back with one of his arms in there.
In this photograph, do you recognize who that is?
Yes.
Who is it?
Chris.
And he's on his back.
Yes.
When you found him, was his shirt closed?
Yes. We cut it off and started CPR on both of them.
When you first found him, how was he positioned in comparison to this photograph?
His nose was in the pool of blood on the right. His hat was still on his head when he was face down.
Who arrived to try to help you, try to save Chris?
David Pritchard and Nathan Lowry. We David brought a defibrillator out to the range. We cut his shirt off, hooked the defibrillator up, and as that was doing what it was supposed to do, we went over to Chad, cut his shirt off, and started CPR by hand and a pump.
This revolver, this cowboy style revolver over here above Chris's head, was that there?
Yes, sir.
Did any of y'all move that?
No.
I'll show you States Exhibit 46. So Chad,
Yes.
is that the position he was in when you found him?
Yes, it is.
When you found him, was his shirt still intact?
Yes, we cut his shirt off.
But his arms and his legs, is that how they were?
Yes, that's how they were.
Did work on these two men, I guess frantically for a while, didn't he?
We did until the paramedics showed up.
And Rough Creek had a automated defibrillator device to try to detect the heart rate.
Yes, sir.
Did that machine seem to detect the heart rate on either of these two men?
It did say pulse detected on Chris.
So did y'all continue to try? What did it say about Chad?
I can't remember if it said anything about Chad. Well, after it said that on Chris, we left it on him.
But there's no sign of life that you could see.
No.
Did more Rough Creek staff while you waited for the paramedics to make the long route out there?
Yes.
Who else arrived?
Paul Bocafoli and Frank Alvarez. And I believe maybe Emily Grundy had pulled into the parking lot but left after that. And only Paul and Frank came up to the platform.
When the paramedics arrived, did you stay there and continue to help?
When they showed up, all three of us got out of the way and they went over and confirmed that they were dead, and that's when we washed our hands.
I'll pass the witness around.
Pass the witness.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right, you may step down.
Hello,
Would you introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
I'm Lieutenant Bobby Epps from the Somerville County Fire Department.
Now, were you working and were you on duty on February the 2nd, 2013?
No, ma'am.
So were you off duty that day?
Yes, ma'am. I was off duty, off shift. I was at the fire station finishing up some personal business.
Okay. And did you, though, I guess, even though you were off duty, did you accompany another EMT or paramedic on a call?
Yes, ma'am. When we still carried our pagers even though we were on or off duty, and my pager went off when I was there. And when I heard the secondary, which is what we asked for when we check en route.
What does that mean?
When you get a tone, or I'm sorry, when you get dispatched to a location, they typically just tell you if it's respond to a medical emergency or a fire at such and such address. And then when your unit checks en route, you'll say, Glen Rose from Medic 1, show us en route, go ahead with secondary. And that's when they said we got two patients with gunshot wounds. So I know there's two patients. So I hopped on the ambulance and went out there with Matt Green and Eric Williams.
Where were you directed to go to at Rough Creek Lodge?
While we were en route, they advised us that it was going to be located at the shooting range is where we needed to go. And there was three of us and none of us in the ambulance knew that location. We've only been mainly to the main lodge area and really nothing past that. Yes, ma'am. The big hotel area where they stay and they host events.
So you weren't familiar where the shooting range was. How'd you find it?
there was somebody there in a mule or golf cart, off-road UTV type vehicle that directed us where to go.
So when you and Green and Williams get there to the shooting range, following this guy on the golf cart, what do you see?
We saw from where we parked, all you could see was a shooting range. You could see downrange, and you could see a structure that was there it had a roof on it, and it was elevated off the ground a few feet. And we couldn't see anything until we got closer and looked around the corner of the structure itself. When I came around the corner of the shooting deck, I didn't get out and go up there initially because I was still communicating between the helicopter of our location and where we would be possibly needing one to land. And then I came around if you're facing the rear of the structure, I came around the right side up on the wooden deck. Matt Green was assessing a patient that showed to be Chad Littlefield. And then in front of the deck on the ground, it wasn't on the shooting range, but on the ground in front was a white male being assessed by a Rough Creek employee who had an AED with him. And at that time, Eric Williams was also with him getting information from the medical staff from Rough Creek that was there.
When you got there to the scene, did you check the vital signs of either Chad or Chris?
I hooked up our Philips monitor, which has an AED function, but we don't use it very often, the AED part of it. We just manually do it ourselves. That's the level that we're trained to. And yes, ma'am, I did. I hooked up a 3-lead, which is stickers that go here on your right side, your left side, and on your left abdomen typically, and it will read any electrical activity in the heart.
And so did you hook that up to Chris Cobb?
Yes, ma'am, I did.
Did you detect any kind of signs of life?
Negative. No, ma'am.
And what injuries did you see on Chris Cobb?
The only thing that I could see on him in the position that he was when we got there was blood in his hair, and there was blood on his abdomen. Not a lot, but a little bit. And his shirt had been ripped open because that's how they had to put the pads on from the AED use that was there prior to our arrival. And it appeared that he had 2 wounds to his thoracic area that I could see.
To his torso?
Yes, ma'am.
Chest area, okay.
And then I want to say what it looked like to me, he had a wound to his face on his cheek. I want to say it was his right cheek.
So when you got there, he had no pulse,
No, ma'am.
no signs of electrical heart activity.
No, ma'am.
And at that time, you'll make the determination that he's dead.
Yes, ma'am. Under Eric Williams was the highest certified EMS person at the time, and he said he's deceased.
Now, what's going on over here with Chad Littlefield? Is someone also checking his vital signs?
Yes, ma'am. That would be Matt Green.
And so do you know what we detected on Chad Littlefield, or should we ask Matt Green?
I would ask Matt Green. I had no patient contact at all.
You were there checking on Chris?
Yes, ma'am.
But he was already dead.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you see a weapon that was near Chris Kyle's head when you were out there looking near him?
Yes, ma'am. There was a wood-handled long barrel revolver that was to the right. It was above Chris Kyle's head, to the right, just a little bit, and it was pointing barrel downrange.
Thank you very much. I'll pass the witness.
I don't have any questions with it.
You may step down.
Good afternoon.
Please introduce yourself to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury.
Do I need to stand?
No.
My name is Matthew Green. I'm a firefighter paramedic with Somerville County Fire Department.
And so did the 3 of y'all, you, Bobby Epps, and Eric Williams, go to Rough Creek Lodge?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
And you pulled up there, then what did y'all see as you got out of the ambulance?
We saw two men laying on the ground, unresponsive, and then there was another individual who was from Rough Creek Lodge who was attempting to provide medical treatment to these 2 men.
Which one of these 2 men that were injured did you attempt to work on?
That would have been Chad Littlefield.
And when you approached Chad Littlefield, did you notice whether he was breathing or not?
There were no respirations. I assessed his pulse. Neither a carotid nor a radial pulse were noted. His skin color was not a normal color. It was more of a pale ashen color as well.
Did you notice anything about his skin temperature?
He was quite cold.
He was cold.
Yes, ma'am.
And did you determine that he was in fact dead?
Yes, ma'am. One of the other things that we do to help determine that in the field is we'll place an EKG on them, and then we'll assess asystole in multiple leads 1, 2, and 3, and depending on whether we did the standard electrodes or paddles, we'll also assess paddles as well.
And so did you determine that he was in a suicide?
Yes, ma'am, and I had my paramedic partner confirm that as well.
What kind of visible injuries did he have?
He appeared to have a gunshot wound to the forehead. Also, it looked like he had a gunshot wound on his left arm. Also looked like one on his pectoral group and one just on the upper part of his left abdomen.
What did you notice around his head, or in the area around his head?
It looked like he might have had a little bit of brain matter, skull matter next to his head on the ground.
On that deck behind his head?
Yes, ma'am.
I'll pass the witness.
Any questions for the trial?
All right. Then conclude your testimony. You
Good
may.
afternoon, Deputy.
Good afternoon.
Could you introduce yourself to the jury?
My name's Keith Martin, deputy with Somerville County. Been there for approximately 5 years.
What was the nature of the call that you received relating to something that happened at Rough Creek Lodge?
The initial call came in with 2 victims that had been shot. Unclear as to whether or not they had shot themselves, shot each other, or were shot by a third party. Our information was kind of limited at that point.
So all you knew at that point was 2 men had been shot.
Yes, sir.
About what time did that dispatch call come in?
It was between 5 and 5:15 p.m.
What actions did you take after you got that call around 5:15?
I immediately got into my patrol unit, drove straight to Rough Creek Lodge. I was met at the entrance by an employee there. She stated that it was going to be past the lodge and would lead me there through the back exit.
And upon arrival, what did you observe at the long shooting range?
As I rounded the shooting platform, there was one gentleman working on, looked like he was doing chest compressions consistent with CPR on one victim that was on the shooting platform. And 2 other gentlemen were doing the same with another gentleman that was laying on the ground. They also had an AED hooked up to that particular victim.
What steps did you take to assess the situation and secure the scene?
The first step I took, being the first officer on scene, I asked everyone to step back behind the platform, make sure they didn't touch anything. I asked all the members that were doing CPR to continue what they were doing, and just try to keep everyone back and make sure that they didn't touch anything, contaminate any evidence, move anything, until I had some backup there that could help assist that.
During that time, are you satisfied that you were able to preserve the scene as it was when you found it?
Yes, sir. I feel that we preserved the scene as it was when we arrived.
I think you passed the witness, Your Honor.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Nothing further, Your Honor.
All right. You may step down.
Tell us your name.
Rayleigh Parrish,
And where do you work, Ms. Parrish?
Midlothian Police Department.
Listen, my brother just came by here. I was at 219 South 9th Street. He's now left, and he told me that he committed a murder. Okay. And I'm terrified for my life. Okay. But I don't know if he's going to come down here. Okay. You live at 219 South 9th Street? Yes, ma'am. He just lived there. Hold up. Okay, thanks. Oh, my God. What's his name and what does he live in? His name is Eddie Brown. Come on, babe. Get your shoes on myself. Okay, can you come up here to the police station? Yes, you're right now. I'm not really too far. What's your date of birth? September 30th, 1987. Okay, go ahead. And I don't know, now listen, I don't know if you're being honest with me. Apparently, like, I was really careful. I don't even know if your police department is over there. Over by the highway. It used to be a church. Yes, ma'am. It used to be a church. I'm not with you until you get here, okay? What is your name? No, it's good because I'm not scared. Call your mom, please, and make sure she's not coming home. No, I don't need to stop. What is your name, ma'am? My name is Laura Blevins. Spell your last name, please. B like boy, L-E, V like Victor, I-N-N. Okay. And who did he say he had killed? He said that he killed two guys. They went out to a shooting range. Like, he's all crazy. He's like he's psychotic. I'm sorry for how late. No, I don't know if he's on drugs or not, but I know that he's been. Let me stop here. Let me have my husband to talk to you. I'm so nervous. Yes. Go ahead and tell me what he said.
He said he killed two guys at a shooting range. He took one of them truck, like a dark blue or maybe black F-250.
Okay.
And he drove off and then, I'm not sure everyone.
And do we know, so he's in the F-250 right now?
Yes, and there's two brothers, two guns in the front.
Okay. And do we know what shooting range he was talking about?
He didn't say.
He didn't say, okay. Are y'all on your way up here to the police department right now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. All right, did he make any threats towards y'all?
No, he didn't. I didn't see anything threat. He was talking kind of babble.
Yeah. Do y'all think he's been drinking or any drugs? Did he know to do that in the past?
Yeah, he knows the drinking in the past. Well, he was recently diagnosed with PTSD.
With what?
PTSD.
PTSD?
Yeah, post-traumatic stress disorder.
Okay, okay.
And he's been acting real weird. He was inside of a mental hospital right now.
Okay, what hospital did he get out of?
Green Oaks.
When did he get out of Green Oaks?
About a week ago.
Okay. Okay. Just let me know when you get here at the PD.
Okay. You're pulling up.
You're pulling up into the parking lot right now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, go ahead and come into the lobby and we'll get an officer to come speak to you, okay?
Okay.
All right. Okay.
I'll pass the witness.
No question, Judge.
Would you
All
introduce
right, you may
yourself,
step.
ladies and gentlemen of the jury?
My name is Chet Kelly.
And so, now, do you know Chad Littlefield?
I do, yes, ma'am.
Let's talk about February the 2nd, 2013, Mr. Kelly. Did you become aware some way that something unusual was going on back in your hometown?
Yes, actually, a lady from the PTA with my wife had called and something had happened with Chris.
What did you decide that you needed to do?
I tried to call Chad's phone.
So you called Chad's phone, and what happened?
The phone was picked up. I was kind of excited to hear a voice on the other end of the phone, knowing that no one else could get a hold of him. Once I said, "Hey, Chad, it's Chet. What's going on? Is everything okay?" The response that I got back was, "No, it's not Chad. It's Eddie." And at that point, I kind of didn't know what to think. I was kind of lost for words.
The person that said this isn't Chad, is that?
Yes, ma'am.
So when the person picked up the phone and they, I guess, said hello or whatever you
Uh-huh.
would have said,
Mhm.
did you immediately recognize that the voice wasn't Chad's?
I didn't.
Were you, I guess, what was your state of mind when you were calling?
Kind of in a panic. Didn't know what to think. Kind of thought the worst, possibly.
So when you heard a voice answer the phone,
It kind of relieved. Yes, ma'am.
when the person said, "This is Eddie," then how did you respond?
Then just apologized and said, "I'm sorry, Eddie. I must have the wrong phone number."
So you thought you just dialed the wrong
I thought it could have got lines crossed. I wasn't sure it wasn't who that I thought I called.
Now, do you actually know Eddie Ray Ralph, though?
I do.
How do you know him?
His sister used to babysit my kids.
Would you have had Eddie Ralph's phone number in your phone?
No,
Didn't know him that well.
no, ma'am.
I'll pass it.
No question.
All right, you may step down.